Vinland Saga is such a fascinating anime because for an anime, for something that has been created in Japan, the specter of Christianity so deeply permeates throughout its runtime. Without trying to spoil too much of the story, we follow this young boy, Thorfinn, a kid who's growing up in like the middle of nowhere. It's Iceland in the Middle Ages, so it really is just wholesome rural living for the most part. But then a war begins to brew on the European continent. The English and the Danes are at it again, which means all the men in the village have been summoned to go fight, and look who's decided to tag along with the adults. Now, this opening sequence of this anime is actually really powerful because we have all of these young men wanting to go fight in the war, and we also have this really young kid, Thorfinn, also wanting to fight in this war. And while we deem it ridiculous for Thorfinn when he expresses his desire to fight, it's also the same for the rest of these guys who have not seen a day in combat, have barely trained, and it comes as a crashing realization to all of them that they are no different to the child who is traveling with them. They're all excited and looking forward to fighting as if it were an adventure they were all going off to, but upon encountering the first moment of combat, they are all powerless to do anything as their leader, Thorfinn's father, is brutally killed in front of their own eyes. They are merely children and no different to Thorfinn. However, what happens to the young boy himself? He's basically seen his dad killed in front of him, so he's got to do something about it, right? So he does, and he accompanies the guy who killed his dad, joins his gang, training tirelessly and building himself up to the point where he can enact his revenge. And that's the story we follow throughout this first season of Vinland Saga. Does Thorfinn become successful in enacting his revenge? Does he ever become strong enough to stand up for himself, or does he later learn that this endeavor is futile? Does he follow his father's earlier advice that he has no enemies and that a true warrior bears no sword? The Bible's pretty clear on revenge, as Paul writes that vengeance is mine, I will repay, thus saith the Lord. There is a futility in seeking revenge, and there's signs throughout this anime which indicate as such, because man's purpose ought to be for something higher and something greater than himself. Let's say that Thorfinn kills the guy who killed his dad. What would happen next? He does have a family to go back to, but his dad ain't coming back because of what he did. Sure, he built himself up and gained some impressive combat skills, but it's all for nothing if he's not out on the battlefield, right? Now, let's compare Thorfinn with some of the other characters, namely the ones who espouse that they're Christian, because there's a difference in how vengeance, or lack thereof, I should say, is treated. In one of the earlier episodes, an injured Thorfinn is taken in and nursed by these Christians, and it matters not if one is Danish or English. Jesus' calling on us is to extend that charity to the vulnerable. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him because Jesus has been anointed to proclaim good news to the poor, sent to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free. And later on, upon realization that Thorfinn indeed was collaborating with the Vikings in order to prepare an attack on her village, this woman looks at Thorfinn not with vengeance in her heart, but it is with great sadness and shock over the depravity of man. Further in the series, we meet a young Christian girl who by sheer chance escaped the massacre enacted upon her village by the Vikings, who just showed up out of nowhere. And just as God had shown her mercy by hiding her from the Vikings, she too displays that same mercy to those who killed her family. Yes, she goes on to the next town to call for reinforcements, but by the end of the episode, it's not as if she harbors vengeance against her family's killers, but it is with the security and comfort of the knowledge that they are now with God that she leaves this ordeal with peace and a great gratitude for the mercy that God's shown to her. Looking now at the young Prince Canute, who had been captured and kidnapped, as well as having been used as a bargaining chip, he has been treated with the greatest deal of disrespect. He has witnessed the worst of atrocities committed by those who call themselves his servants. He has been dragged around like a pawn by those in the royal court, yet Canute lacks vengeance in his heart. He instead moves forward because he has a firm foundation that all that matters in the end is what God thinks. He may have suffered, but it is with the authority given to him by God that he instead bestows mercy. In each of these cases, it is mercy which is displayed by these Christians, because ultimately it is Jesus who brings final judgment. It is God who has established the governing authorities, and it is only through these authorities God's established that justice can be appropriately carried out. On the individual level, it is because Jesus first approached us with mercy over our sin that we too are called to be merciful and also to forgive those who have sinned against us. Jesus calls us to love our enemies, to turn the other cheek, to go the extra mile, and it's because while of course we are also permitted to use our strength to defend ourselves against an offensive attacker, Jesus ultimately desires mercy over strength. Thinking of a more modern incident where this has occurred, we saw from the Bishop Marmari Emmanuel, who forgave his attacker and extended such a beautiful display of mercy. Of course, we're not saying that he shouldn't be punished for breaking the law, but what the Bible has told us and what Paul and Jesus calls us to is to delegate that punishment not to us so that we are the ones enforcing the law, but we are to leave those legal processes to the governing authorities for which God has instituted. And the calling for us as Christians, the calling for us as individuals, is actually a calling to mercy rather than to vigilante justice. What makes Vinland Saga so captivating as a narrative is this exact line of inquiry. We are following a young boy who is so set on enacting revenge, and while we do so desperately want justice to be served and to be carried out on behalf of Thorfinn, at the same time, we just see how vengeance has so deeply corrupted and broken this young boy's heart. There's a reason why we as Christians on the individual level are called to a deep sense of mercy, that we are called to love our enemies, and it is upon those themes present in this series that I'm happy to say Vinland Saga really is a Christian anime. I'm planning to do a few more videos in the coming weeks on Vinland Saga, and those videos will be made accessible through this playlist. While you're waiting though, you might want to explore another action anime that's been popular this season, that being Kaiju number 8.